You just watched a bird splash into your yard's water dish, spread its wings against the surface, dunk its whole head under. You thought the same thing everyone thinks. It's cleaning itself. Getting the grime off after a long morning at the feeder. That assumption is wrong, and the real reason birds use your water dish is far stranger and more urgent than anything you'd expect. What that bird is doing has nothing to do with hygiene. It's closer to what a surgeon does before opening someone up. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you're going to watch birds completely differently, starting the next time one lands in your yard. Here's the first thing most people don't realize. Bird feathers aren't like fur or skin. They're not passive covering. They're an engineered system. Each feather is built from hundreds of interlocking microstructures called barbules, tiny hooks that zip together like the teeth of a zipper. When that system is working perfectly, the bird is aerodynamically efficient, thermally insulated, and almost completely waterproof. When it degrades, even slightly, the bird is slower, colder, and burning more energy just to stay alive with every wingbeat it takes. The margin between a functioning feather system and a dangerous one is measured in microns. That's how precise this engineering actually is. Now here's where the bathing comes in, and this is where it gets genuinely unexpected. Birds don't bathe to remove dirt. They bathe to reset the mechanical alignment of those barbule hooks. The water is a tool, not a cleaning agent. Every time a bird flies, lands, squeezes through dense brush, or sleeps pressed against a branch, those tiny structures shift and misalign. Water is the solvent that loosens tension between them, allowing the bird, through its beak, to re-zip each feather individually from base to tip. Without the water step first, the preening doesn't work. The hooks won't reset. The feather stays compromised no matter how long the bird grooms. But resetting structure is only the first function. There's a second one almost nobody knows about, and it involves a gland most people have never heard of. Just above a bird's tail sits the uropygial gland. It produces a specialized oil that the bird applies to every single feather after bathing. That oil does three things simultaneously. It waterproofs the feather, adds UV protection, and in some species carries chemical signals that other birds can detect. Here's the critical detail. That oil only bonds correctly to a feather that has been wetted and mechanically realigned first. Skip the bath, and the oil sits on top of degraded structure, like applying fresh sealant to a cracked surface. It looks treated. The system underneath is still broken. What you're watching when a bird bathes in your yard isn't a cleaning routine. It's a precision maintenance cycle that can take up to 40 minutes to complete. Different species run this protocol differently. The northern cardinal, the one most likely visiting your dish right now, is one of the most thorough bathers of any backyard bird. A male cardinal will submerge his head completely, multiple times, pausing between dips. Researchers at Cornell Lab documented that cardinals average more individual immersions per bath session than any other common feeder species. The reason is structural. Cardinals have dense, layered plumage. That vivid red requires more oil per square inch of feather surface than the lighter coloring of most other species. A cardinal that skips bathing for 3 to 4 days will show measurable degradation in feather alignment, visible as a slightly ruffled, dull appearance even on a healthy bird. The chickadee does this completely differently. A black-capped chickadee weighs about as much as 2 pennies. Its entire energy budget operates on margins that would seem impossible for an animal that size. Because of that weight constraint, a chickadee cannot afford the extended bath sessions a cardinal runs. A wet chickadee in cold air loses heat faster than it can generate it. So chickadees have evolved a compressed protocol, rapid, shallow dips of 10 to 15 seconds maximum, followed by immediate vigorous shaking before the feathers are fully saturated. The baths are shorter, but they're more frequent. A chickadee may visit a water source 4 or 5 times in a single morning, where a cardinal visits once for a long session. 2 birds. Same yard. Same water dish. Running completely different maintenance strategies that evolved independently to solve the exact same biological problem. The next time you see a chickadee and a cardinal at your dish on the same morning, you're watching 2 different aeronautical maintenance schedules running side by side. Now there's a second function. And this one is connected to a biological limitation that birds share with almost no other warm-blooded animal. Birds can't sweat. They have no sweat glands anywhere on their bodies. Their primary cooling mechanism is panting, evaporating moisture through the respiratory system. But panting has limits. On hot summer afternoons, when air temperature reaches 90 degrees and humidity is high, panting alone is not enough to regulate core temperature. The water in your dish becomes a heat exchange tool. Direct contact with cool water drops core body temperature almost immediately through conduction. The evaporation that follows, as the sun dries the wet feathers, extends that cooling for another 20 to 30 minutes after the bird has left your yard entirely. That's why your water dish gets the most traffic on the hottest days of summer. The birds aren't thirstier. They're using your dish as climate control infrastructure. But now flip the season. Winter changes the calculation completely, and this is where most people's mental model of bird bathing completely breaks down. Most people assume birds stop bathing in winter. The logic seems obvious. Cold water, freezing temperatures, wet feathers in the cold sounds dangerous. That assumption is wrong. Birds bathe in winter, they just manage the timing and method with extraordinary precision. Cardinals have been documented bathing in water temperatures just above freezing. They do it in the warmest part of the day, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., when ambient temperature gives them the best window to dry before nightfall. A cardinal going into roost with wet feathers on a January night is a cardinal that may not survive until morning. The timing of the winter bath is a survival calculation, not a preference. Chickadees, by contrast, almost entirely suspend water bathing below a certain temperature threshold. Their compressed weight means the risk-reward of getting wet in freezing conditions tips against bathing. Instead, chickadees rely almost exclusively on dust bathing through winter, which brings us to the third function, and the one that surprises most people the most. Birds also bathe in dust. If you've ever seen a bird pressing its chest into a dry patch of bare dirt and shaking its wings into the ground, you've seen this. That behavior is called dust bathing, and it is not confusion or displacement. It is a completely separate maintenance system running in parallel with water bathing. Fine dry dust penetrates between feather layers and absorbs excess oil and moisture, the exact microenvironment where feather lice, mites, and fungal spores proliferate. The bird then shakes the dust off, and with it come the parasites that got trapped in the fine particles. It's a dry extraction system for biological threats living inside the feather structure. Some species take this even further. Certain birds will deliberately land on an active ant colony and let the ants move freely through their feathers. The behavior is called anteing, and researchers have documented it in over 200 species worldwide. The ants secrete formic acid as they move, a natural pesticide targeting the same feather parasites. What looks from your window like a bird sitting still on an anthill is a bird running a targeted chemical treatment that it cannot manufacture itself. Take the full picture. Water bathing resets feather structure. Oil application restores waterproofing. Dust bathing removes biological threats. Anteing delivers chemical deterrents. These are 4 distinct maintenance systems, running on different schedules, triggered by different conditions, managed simultaneously by an animal with a brain the size of a walnut. Your yard is the facility where all 4 of those systems operate. The water dish, the bare dirt patch, the anthill in the corner. You built a maintenance depot without knowing it. Here's what the failure state looks like, because this is what tells you how serious the maintenance is. A bird with severely compromised feathers loses flight efficiency measurably. Studies from a University of Exeter on wild songbirds documented up to a 12% increase in energy expenditure during flight in birds with degraded feather alignment. 12% sounds small. In a bird running a caloric budget with almost no margin, it means the difference between surviving a cold night and not surviving it. Feather degradation also reduces the insulation layer that traps body heat against the skin. A bird without adequate insulation on a cold night is burning energy reserves it needs for morning foraging before the sun rises. When a bird chooses your water dish, it's not stopping for convenience. It's stopping because your yard passed a safety assessment. The water is clean. The location allows escape. The environment is predictable. A bird that trusts your yard enough to bathe there has lowered its threat response to run a maintenance cycle that leaves it temporarily more vulnerable. That is a specific form of trust. There's one more function. And this is the one that shifts the entire meaning of what your water dish actually represents in the bird community. Bird bathing is social behavior. Not always, but in far more cases than most people realize. And the social dynamics at a shared water source are deeply structured. When a dominant individual enters a water dish, subordinate birds wait at a precise distance, not random, but calibrated to their specific position in the local social hierarchy. When a juvenile enters alone, it will often bathe longer and more thoroughly than it would in the presence of adults. Stress suppresses bathing. Safety enables it. When multiple birds of the same species bathe together, and this happens regularly at well-maintained water sources, something specific happens neurologically in each of them. Shared bathing reduces threat assessment. It's a window of mutual lowered alertness. Birds that bathe together regularly build a trust baseline they use in other contexts, coordinating alarm calls, sharing feeding space. The water dish in your yard isn't just a resource. It's the physical location where the birds in your neighborhood build and maintain their social bonds. Research at Cornell Lab on urban bird populations found that individual birds show strong site fidelity to specific water sources, returning to the same dish, sometimes at the same hour, across multiple seasons. The robin that comes to your dish every morning around 7 isn't being random. It has mapped your yard as a reliable safe node in its daily circuit and returns to it by memory. If you've ever noticed a bird coming back to your yard at a consistent time on consistent days, you've been watching site fidelity behavior, and that bird knows your yard specifically. Take all of that together. The feather mechanics. The species-specific protocols. The thermoregulation. The parasite defense. The social architecture. And then look at the bird in your dish again. That bird isn't taking a bath. It's running a 60-million-year-old maintenance protocol on an aeronautical system so precisely engineered that aerospace researchers have studied bird feather structure for drone design applications. It's lowering its core temperature without a single sweat gland, using physics and behavioral timing instead of biology alone. It's managing a microscopic ecosystem of organisms living between its feathers with a chemical defense system it manufactures in its own body and deploys on a schedule it tracks internally. And it is doing all of this in a space it chose. A space it returned to, mapped as safe, and remembered across seasons, because of what you put there and how you maintain it. Right now, in the yards within a 2-mile radius of your house, hundreds of birds are running this same maintenance cycle, each one connected to the others through alarm networks, shared water sites, and social memory. The bird in your dish is a node in that network. And your yard is part of the infrastructure that keeps the network functioning. The specific behaviors you're watching, the wing spreading, the head dunking, the shaking, are identical to behaviors preserved in bird fossils from the early Cretaceous period. Dinosaur-era birds did this. 100 million years of selection pressure produced exactly this motion, in exactly this sequence. And it's happening 15 feet from your kitchen window, in a dish you filled this morning. The next time you see a bird splash into your water dish, you won't see a bird taking a bath. You'll see an aeronautical engineer running maintenance, a thermoregulation system doing fieldwork, and a social node reinforcing the trust network that holds your local bird community together. That small dish of water is not a decoration. It's not an amenity. It's active infrastructure, and the birds in your yard have understood that far longer than you have. There's something science can measure here, and something it hasn't finished asking about yet. Why certain birds return to certain yards. Why some people find themselves watched, visited, trusted. What the research tells us is that birds remember specific places and specific presences. The rest, what that means, is still being worked out. Have you ever watched a bird in your water dish and noticed something that stopped you, a movement that didn't make sense, a behavior you couldn't explain, a moment that felt like more than routine? Tell me in the comments. What bird was it, and what were you watching when it happened? This community has shared some of the most remarkable observations I've read, and every single one matters. If this changed how you're going to look at your yard, share it with someone who has a bird bath and doesn't know any of this yet. I'll see you in the next one.